Hello everyone, welcome once again, and today I will be showing you on how you can get the best GCAM or the Google camera available for your smartphone. For this, your device must have the support of the Camera 2 API. So do watch till the end so do not miss any step. With this said, let's get our video started. So for getting the best GCAM available for your device, you have to install the GCAMTOR app, which is easily available on the Play Store. Also, I will be giving out the link to the app in the description below. So I have already installed it. So let's open it. So on opening the app, it will first search for the Camera 2 API status of your device. The only drawback of this app is that it takes a lot of time in doing all the process, and also it have a lot of the ads. So now as you can see, the Camera 2 API module has been enabled, and now we have nothing to do, just click on the Your GCAM tab, and now the app will be checking for the best device info and the best available GCAM tab for the device. So here as you can see that my device is the Poco X2 with the Android 10 and the GCAM version 7.2. Now just we have to click on the install and it will start downloading the GCAM. So now our download has been completed, and now we can directly install it. So we can directly install it from here, and you can see if we cannot install it, we have to give the permission for external installing from external source. So now after opening the GCAM, we have to first restore the configured files by pressing on the black area. So as you can see, there is a problem that no configuration file is found. So for solving this problem, we simply have to go to the file manager and then go to the GCAM folder and copy the .xml files from configs folder, from the config 7 folder, and after doing that we simply have to go back to the GCAM and click on this black area, and you can see we can now select the options for selecting the XML file, and after clicking we click on restore, and now as you can see the GCAM is ready to go. So also here are some of the shots taken from my GCAM after installing it. So now coming back to the app, there is a third tab, the GCAM Database tab, where you can find all the GCAMs available for the different smartphones like of Redmi, Poco, Redmi, different models of Redmi, some of Samsung's, Oppo, Realme and other smartphones. If you cannot find the perfect GCAM from the above methods, You can go from here and you can check for the GCAM available best for smartphones. So this was my video on how you can get the best GCAM available for your smartphones. Do let me know what are your thoughts on this method and in the comments below, and I will be meeting you soon in some other video. Till then, stay home, stay safe, and have a nice day. Bye bye.